The last person I saw before I died was not my wife. It was her aunt. Rianne was kneeling beside me on the cold floor of an empty conference room. One hand pressed against the blood soaking through my shirt, the other gripping a folder thick enough to destroy 3 careers and at least 1 marriage. Her normally perfect hair had come loose. I'd never seen that before. Rianne never came undone. Not in boardrooms. Not during billion-dollar negotiations. Not when her own family was tearing itself apart. But that night, she looked terrified. Stay awake. Kai. Her voice shook. That frightened me more than the blood. 5 hours earlier, my wife Yuna had told the board that I was responsible for the missing funds. Damon, her assistant, lover, accomplice, whatever title suited him that week, had disappeared. And somehow, every forged document pointed back to me. I had spent years protecting Yuna, cleaning up scandals, fixing mistakes, standing between her and consequences. In return, she had helped Damon frame me. Apparently marriage was about teamwork after all. Just not with your husband. I found it, Rianne whispered. She held up the folder. Damon used at least 4 identities. The accounts, the transfers, the women he defrauded. I have everything. I almost laughed. Of course she did. Rianne always found the thing everyone else missed. Unfortunately, she had found it several hours too late. You should have hated me, I said. Her expression changed. Because I'm the idiot who married your niece. That makes you stupid, not evil, even dying. I smiled. That was Rianne. Cold enough to freeze a courtroom. Kind enough to sit on the floor in my blood. My vision blurred. Then she said something I spent my entire life being too blind to understand. I should have stopped the wedding. I looked at her. What? Her fingers tightened around mine. For 5 years, I watched you choose her. There was something raw in her eyes now. Something that didn't belong to the woman everyone called the Ice Queen. I stayed away because you were hers. A breath. I thought that was the right thing to do. My heart seemed to stop before my body did. 5 years. I'd spent 5 years secretly wanting Rianne. 5 years looking away whenever she caught me staring. 5 years believing she barely tolerated me. And now I understood. Too late. If I had another chance. I whispered. Her hand closed around mine. But the room was already disappearing. The last thing I heard was Rianne saying my name. Then nothing. Kai. I opened my eyes. Music was playing. Violins. Pachelbel. For several seconds, I stared at myself in a mirror. Black tuxedo. White shirt. Silver cufflinks. No blood. No wound. No dying billionaire heiress holding my hand. I touched my chest. Nothing. Behind me, someone knocked. Kai. My phone sat on the table. I picked it up. The date nearly made me drop it. My wedding day, not the day I died. The day everything had begun. I was 24 again. And according to the clock, the ceremony started in 10 minutes. A strange laugh escaped me. I remembered this room. I remembered the flowers. I remembered thinking Yuna was nervous because she had ignored my messages all morning. In my first life, she eventually walked down the aisle. I married her. That single decision cost me years. Apparently death had given me a refund. The door burst open. A bridesmaid stumbled inside. Her face was white. Kai, there's a problem. I looked at her, and suddenly, something felt wrong. This wasn't how it happened before. What problem? She swallowed. Yuna's gone. I stared. Gone where? With Damon. For the first time since waking up, I forgot how to breathe. The bridesmaid rushed on. They climbed out the bathroom window. Someone saw them getting into a car. Her phone's off. Her mother is losing her mind. I should have been devastated. The groom had just been abandoned 10 minutes before his wedding. 400 guests were sitting outside. 2 powerful families had spent months negotiating a merger tied to this marriage. My bride had escaped through a bathroom window with the same man who helped destroy me in my previous life. So naturally, I almost smiled. I turned away before the bridesmaid could see it. Yuna had run. She had actually run. In my first life, I had needed years of betrayal, humiliation, and finally death to escape her. This time she had done the job herself. Through a window, in heels. Maybe reincarnation really did come with benefits. Kai. I forced my expression into something appropriately wounded. Years in crisis communications had taught me that people trusted pain more when it was quiet. Where is her family? In the hall. Let's go. The hallway outside looked like civilization had ended specifically for rich people. Yuna's mother, Vera, was yelling at 3 assistants. Someone was calling a lawyer. Someone else was trying to stop a cousin from filming. The string quartet continued playing because apparently nothing. Not adultery, financial catastrophe, or the collapse of a dynasty. Could defeat professionalism. Then Soren struck his cane against the marble. Once. Silence. Yuna's grandfather looked around the room. The alliance stands. Vera blinked. Father, the wedding will proceed. For one extraordinary second, nobody asked the obvious question. Then I felt it. Presence behind me. I turned. And there she was, Rian, 29 years old, dark hair pinned neatly back, black eyes calm enough to make panicking executives question their life choices. The real heir to the family. The woman who had held my hand while I died. The woman who, in another lifetime, had confessed 5 years too late. My chest tightened. She was alive. So was I. And she had no idea I had already lost her once. Soren looked at Rian, then at me. I understood immediately. So did she. Vera whispered. You can't be serious. Soren ignored her. Rian will take Yuna's place. The room exploded. I heard nothing. I was looking only at Rian. She walked toward me slowly, controlled, unreadable, exactly as I remembered. When she stopped in front of me, she lowered her voice. You don't have to agree. That almost broke me. In my last life, everyone had decided what I owed them. Yuna, my family, the company, the board. Rian was the only person who had ever looked at me and offered a choice. Even now, even when billions were at stake. If you refuse, she continued, I'll deal with the consequences. I looked at the woman I'd secretly wanted for 5 years. The woman who loved me in a life neither of us could get back. Except somehow, I had, around us, 400 people waited for the humiliated groom to make the noble decision. They thought I was choosing between shame and duty. They had no idea. I held out my hand. Rian looked at it, then at me. If you're willing, I said. So am I. Her fingers slid into mine. Cool, real, alive. And for the first time since waking up, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my second life. Not revenge. Not yet. Damon could wait. Yuna could make as many mistakes as she wanted. This time I wasn't going to waste my life chasing the people who betrayed me. I was going to protect the one person who hadn't. The ceremony began 11 minutes late. They changed the bride's name. Someone found another ring. When the priest asked Rian if she would take me as her husband, she answered before he finished. I do. My heart stopped. Not from death this time. From memory. 5 years. She had loved me for 5 years, and I had died before I could love her back properly. I tightened my fingers around hers. Everyone in that hall thought Yuna running away had ruined my life. I knew better, as Rian stood beside me in a wedding dress meant for another woman. One thought settled quietly into place. Thank you, Yuna. Last time, I married the wrong woman. This time, you handed me the right one. My new wife wanted a divorce. Eventually, considering we'd been married for less than 3 hours, I thought that was impressively efficient. Rian stood in the bridal suite, still wearing a wedding dress that had been altered for another woman, and placed a document on the table between us. A few years, she said. Once the merger is stable and the attention dies down, we separate quietly. I looked at the agreement. In my previous life, I'd signed plenty of documents that destroyed me. This one might have been my favorite. No scandal, she continued. No interference in each other's private lives. Publicly, we behave as husband and wife. Privately, we respect boundaries and feelings. Her eyes lifted. We don't confuse proximity with affection. I nearly smiled. That was very Rian. Even her marriage came with risk management. Understood. She studied me. You're taking this surprisingly well. If only she knew. I died once. I discovered my wife was helping her lover frame me. I'd watched my reputation collapse. And in the final minutes of my life, I'd learned that the woman standing in front of me had secretly loved me for 5 years. Compared with that, A marriage contract wasn't particularly intimidating. I've had a complicated day. That makes two of us. She turned away. I watched her for a moment. In my first life, I'd always thought Rian disliked me. She rarely spoke to me at family dinners. Never stayed beside me longer than necessary. Whenever I entered a room, she seemed to become colder. Now I knew why. She hadn't been avoiding someone she hated. She'd been avoiding someone she wasn't allowed to want. That knowledge was dangerous. I could use it, push her, tell her things only the future version of her had confessed, make her vulnerable before she understood why. I wouldn't. She deserved better than being manipulated by a dead man's memories. If Rian fell in love with me again, I wanted her to do it freely, so I signed, and decided to start from the beginning. The next morning, I woke at 6:15. Some habits apparently survived death. Rian was already downstairs. Of course she was. The woman could probably survive the apocalypse and still answer emails before breakfast. She sat at the kitchen island in a dark blouse, reading a report on her tablet. I walked to the coffee machine. Black, 1 sugar, stir, remove the spoon. I placed the cup beside her. Rian stopped reading. Her eyes moved to the coffee, then to me, then back to the coffee. Black, 1 sugar. I nodded. No spoon. Yes. How did you know? Because in my previous life, during the worst month of my existence, you brought me coffee every night while we investigated Damon. Because I watched you make your own. Because after everything else disappeared, stupid little details were the things I remembered. Instead I shrugged. Lucky guess. Rian stared at me for another second. You're either very lucky or very observant. Occupational hazard. She took a sip. Something almost softened in her face. Almost. Is correct. From Rian. That was basically a standing ovation. I turned toward the refrigerator before she saw me smile. Then the front doors opened. Voices filled the house. One belonged to Vera. The other, I knew before I heard the words. Yuna. My hand stopped on the refrigerator handle. A strange coldness moved through me. For half a second, the kitchen disappeared. I saw another room, another life. Yuna standing before a board of directors. Damon gone, millions missing, and my wife refusing to meet my eyes while forged documents appeared on the screen behind me. I remembered asking her one question. You knew. She hadn't answered. She hadn't needed to. Kai. Rian's voice pulled me back. I released the refrigerator handle. I'm fine. She looked unconvinced. Then we walked into the sitting room. Yuna was on the sofa. Damon sat beside her. Their hands were intertwined. That was almost funny. The man who would eventually abandon her the moment she stopped being profitable was currently holding her hand like it contained the meaning of life. Damon stood when he saw me. Kai. Same voice. Same carefully measured sympathy. In my first life, I trusted that voice. I had even defended him when people questioned how close he was to my fiancée. I'd been an idiot. Fortunately, death is an excellent cure for that. I know this is difficult. Damon began. Is it? He hesitated. Yuna frowned. Kai, don't do that. Do what? Pretend you don't care. There it was. The confidence. She had abandoned me at our wedding and somehow still believed she controlled the emotional temperature of the room. I know you're angry, she continued, but Damon and I couldn't keep lying to ourselves. Damon lowered his eyes modestly. Professional. We're in love, Yuna said. I looked at him, then at her. In my previous life, those words would have destroyed me. Now they sounded like someone announcing they'd invested their retirement savings in a burning building. Congratulations. Yuna blinked. That's it. What were you expecting? I don't know. Something. Would you prefer a gift? Her face tightened. Vera stepped in immediately. Kai, emotions are high. Yuna made a mistake. But perhaps once everyone has had time. Sister-in-law. Silence. Vera stared at me. Excuse me, sister-in-law. I smiled politely. Rian is your husband's sister. I married Rian yesterday. That makes you my sister-in-law. Yuna slowly straightened. I continued. And technically, I looked at her. That makes me your uncle by marriage. The room froze. Damon looked like he was trying to solve an equation he hadn't prepared for. Yuna's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I enjoyed those 2 seconds more than was mature. You're being childish. she finally said. No, I'm being accurate. You married my aunt because I left you. Yes. To punish me. No. Her confidence flickered. That mattered. People like Yuna could survive anger. What they couldn't survive was discovering they weren't the center of it. You expect me to believe you're suddenly happy. I looked past her. Rianne stood in the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable, beautiful enough to make poor decisions look like divine intervention. Yes, I said. That answer was easier than it should have been. Yuna followed my gaze. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in her face. Then, tap. Soren's cane struck the floor. Everyone stopped. The previous engagement is finished, he said. His gaze settled on Yuna. You chose Damon. You will answer for that choice. Then he looked at me. Kai is Rianne's husband. Finally, Rianne, this marriage will not be treated as temporary entertainment for this family. Yuna went pale. Grandfather. No, one word. Conversation over. That was Soren's specialty. Yuna stood. Damon followed. As they walked toward the door, he looked back at me. Just once. In my previous life, I wouldn't have noticed anything unusual. Now I did. His eyes weren't angry. They were calculating. Not at me. At the house. The paintings. The people. The money. Then his gaze moved to Yuna, and I recognized it. I'd seen that expression before. It was the look Damon wore near the end of my first life when he realized an asset had stopped being useful. My hands curled slowly. So it had already begun. That afternoon, Yuna texted me, "You don't have to pretend." Another message. "I know you married her because you're hurt. Then, when you calm down, you'll understand why I chose Damon." I stared at the screen. In my previous life, I had spent years trying to understand Yuna. This time, I finally did. She didn't want forgiveness. She wanted proof that she still mattered. So I gave her nothing. I put the phone face down. "You're not answering." Rianne stood across the study. I looked up. "No, she'll message again." "I know. You sound very certain." I smiled. "I know her type." Rianne watched me carefully. "You've changed." My heartbeat shifted. That was dangerous. "Since yesterday." "No." She walked closer. "Since you came out of that dressing room." For one terrible second, I wondered if Rianne could somehow see straight through me. Then she picked up a folder from the desk. "You looked like a man who had just lost everything." Her eyes met mine. "But you behaved like someone who had just been given a second chance." I said nothing, because she was exactly right. Rianne left the study. I waited until the door closed. Then I opened my laptop. There was one thing left to do. Damon. In my previous life, I had learned about his fraud too late. I knew he'd used fake investment funds. I knew wealthy women had been targeted. I knew he changed names, but I didn't know where the chain began. And that was the problem with revenge after reincarnation. Knowing how the story ended didn't mean you knew every page. I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed, "Damon, known information." Then I began writing everything I remembered from my previous life. Aliases, companies, dates, victims, accounts. By midnight, I had 3 pages. Not enough to destroy him. Enough to start hunting. I leaned back. In my first life, Damon had always been one step ahead because I didn't realize we were playing a game until I had already lost. This time was different. He didn't know I remembered the ending. He didn't know I knew what he really wanted from Yuna. Most importantly, he didn't know I was watching. I closed the laptop. No rush. No dramatic confrontation. No warning. Damon had spent years building the trap that killed me in my first life. This time, I was going to do something much simpler. I was going to let him build it again. Then make sure he was the one standing inside it when it closed. Yuna announced her relationship with Damon at 9:40 on a Tuesday morning. Not at breakfast. Not at lunch. At 9:40, the exact sort of time that told you she'd spent an hour staring at the caption before finally pressing post. The photo showed her leaning against Damon's shoulder. His smile was soft, measured, practiced. I knew that smile. I'd seen it in another life, usually right before someone trusted him with money. The caption read, "Some things are worth losing everything for." I stared at it for several seconds, then laughed. Not because it was funny, because last time, I had been one of the things she thought she'd gained. This time, apparently, I was part of what she'd lost. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Theo, please tell me you've seen this. Then John. Tacky. Theo again. Worth losing everything for is insane. She lost a wedding, a merger, and probably half her inheritance. John. Efficient. I typed. I'm fine. Theo responded in 3 seconds. That answer makes me less confident. I put the phone down. Across the study, Rianne was reviewing financial reports. She hadn't looked up once. Una went public. I said, I know. Of course she knew. Rianne probably knew about stock fluctuations before the market did. I turned the phone around. She glanced at the photo. Her expression barely moved. Some things are worth losing everything for, she read. Then she looked back at the report. She hasn't lost everything yet. I stared. That was the most threatening accounting statement I'd ever heard. What are you planning? Nothing emotional, which, translated from Rianne, meant someone was about to have an extremely bad fiscal quarter. She closed the folder. Una's division has missed targets for 6 consecutive quarters. Her discretionary account has been abused. Her department generated unnecessary exposure after the wedding. So I'm restructuring. I almost felt sorry for Una. Almost. In my previous life, I had fought with people. Rianne audited them. It was much more frightening. You're enjoying this, she said. I respect good governance. You're smiling. Governance can be beautiful. That earned me half a second of something suspiciously close to amusement. Then I looked at Una's post again. I think we should respond. Rianne's eyes narrowed. With what? Nothing childish. That sentence usually comes before something childish. With evidence. Evidence of what? That our marriage hasn't destroyed us. She stared at me, then understood. No, because I'm not participating in social media warfare with my niece. Not warfare. I stood. Public relations. That is warfare with better tailoring. Exactly. She sighed. 5 minutes later, we were standing beside the study window. I held my phone up. This feels ridiculous, she said. You've negotiated 9-figure contracts. Yes. And this frightens you. It embarrasses me. Much worse. She looked at me flatly. Take the photo. Kai. I did. At the exact second I pressed the button. Rianne leaned closer. Not much. Maybe 2 inches. Enough that her shoulder touched mine. Enough that the photograph stopped looking strategic. I looked down at the screen. That was unfortunate. We looked excellent. Not happy exactly. Worse, we looked natural. Like 2 people who had been standing together for years instead of days. Rianne studied the picture. Acceptable. That's the nicest thing you've ever said about my face. I was referring to the lighting. Cruel. We posted it. No dramatic caption. Just, Tuesday. That was enough. The reaction was immediate. Friends, business partners, relatives, people who had attended the wedding, people who had only heard about it. Comments poured in. You two actually look terrifyingly good together. This is the strongest plot twist of the year. Rianne smiling. Markets may open late tomorrow. She wasn't smiling, but apparently the internet was optimistic. Una messaged me 11 minutes later. Delete that. Then, you're doing this because you're hurt. Then, I understand. You don't need to prove anything. There was a strange beauty in her consistency. Even now, she couldn't imagine a story in which she wasn't the center. I typed, I'm not hurt, then stopped. A younger version of me would have explained, defended, argued. The dead version of me knew better. People who misunderstand you confidently often reveal more if you leave them alone. So I deleted the draft. No response. When I looked up, Rianne was watching me. You changed your mind. Silence is more efficient. Her gaze held mine for a moment. That's something I would say. I've been learning from dangerous people. Should I be concerned? Probably. She looked away first. That felt like winning something I hadn't known we were playing for. Rianne's restructuring was announced Thursday morning. Una's division would be absorbed into corporate communications. Her expense account would require approval, and she would be transferred to the Western branch. 3 hours away, when she arrived at the board meeting. Furious, Rianne already had every document prepared. You're punishing me. Rianne didn't even blink. I'm correcting inefficiency. This happened because I left Kai. No. Rian slid a page across the table. This happened because your division has underperformed for 18 months. Another page. You exceeded discretionary spending limits. Another. You created reputational risk tied to the family name. Another. And because your department no longer justifies independent status. Yuna stared at the stack. You planned this. I documented it. That distinction was lethal. Yuna wanted an enemy. Rian gave her spreadsheets. There was nothing to fight. I sat near the end of the table and watched quietly. In my previous life, I had spent years trying to protect Yuna from consequences. Now I watched consequences introduce themselves. It was strangely peaceful. After the meeting, Vera cornered me in the garden. Apparently she believed flowers made manipulation more respectable. Kai, sister-in-law. Her smile tightened. I wish you'd stop calling me that. I wish family trees were optional. She ignored that. Yuna is confused. She seems very decisive to me. She made one emotional choice. She climbed through a window. Vera exhaled sharply. She and Damon won't last. I already knew that, just not for the reason she thought. When she realizes her mistake, Vera continued, I hope you won't be cruel. I stared at her. There it was, the assumption that I was waiting, that no matter what I did, Yuna still possessed some invisible claim on me. You think I'll take her back? Vera softened her voice. You loved her. In another lifetime, I had, or maybe I'd loved the person I thought she was. Either way, that man was dead. Literally. I'm married. You know what I mean? I do. I stepped closer. And that's the problem. Her smile faded. If Yuna ever wants her old place back, she shouldn't ask me. Then who? I looked toward the house. Rian stood inside near the glass doors, speaking to an executive. Straight posture, cold expression, everyone around her listening. My wife. Vera followed my gaze. Something in her face hardened. Good. She was finally understanding the new hierarchy. I nodded politely, then walked away. That evening, Rian came home soaked. Rain had started without warning. She entered the foyer looking like someone had personally insulted her by allowing weather to touch her. I said nothing. That was important. Instead, I got a towel. She looked at it, then at me. I can dry my own hair. I know. I lifted the towel anyway. For 1 second, I expected her to take it. She didn't, so I stepped closer. Carefully, slowly, I started drying her hair. The room went quiet. In my previous life, physical closeness with Rian had been almost non-existent. A hand on my shoulder, her fingers around mine while I died. That was essentially the entire history. Now she stood perfectly still while I dried rainwater from her hair. Not tense, just still, like movement might break something. You cook, she said quietly. Sometimes. You make coffee. Yes. You apparently understand corporate crisis management. Allegedly. And now this hair. I smiled. Very advanced skill. Her mouth almost moved. Where does it end? The question sounded casual. It wasn't. I understood that immediately. Where did the kindness end? Where did the performance end? Where did I end? Whenever you tell me to stop. She didn't, so I kept going. Afterward, I made dinner. Nothing impressive. Simple food. Warm. Reliable. Rian sat at the counter watching me. That was new. Usually she worked while eating. Tonight, her tablet stayed closed. I placed a plate in front of her. Beside it, black coffee. 1 sugar. No spoon. She stared at the cup. Then at me. You really are observant. I leaned against the counter. Maybe I pay attention to things that matter. Her eyes changed. Only slightly. But I saw it. And suddenly I remembered the last night of my first life. Her hand holding mine. Her voice breaking. 5 years. I looked away. Too much. Too fast. She deserved this life. Not the shadow of the last one. So I turned back to the stove. Behind me, I heard her chair move. When I sat down, I realized she'd moved it closer. Not much. Just enough that our shoulders almost touched. I pretended not to notice. Some victories were too delicate to celebrate. 2 nights later, we attended a charity dinner. Yuna arrived with Damon. That alone was predictable. What happened next wasn't. Across the ballroom, a woman in an emerald dress saw Damon. She stopped moving, her face drained of color. Not surprise, recognition, fear. My entire body went cold. I had seen that expression before, not on her, on other people, in another life, people who had discovered their money was gone, people who realized the charming man they trusted had never existed. I looked at Damon. He hadn't noticed her. Yuna was too busy showing him off. I filed the detail away. Then Yuna came toward me. Of course she did. She'd been drinking. You look ridiculous. Good evening to you too. This whole thing. She gestured between me and the room. You and Rian pretending to be some perfect couple. I said nothing. That irritated her more. You married her because you were embarrassed. Still nothing. You're still angry at me. I smiled. That was apparently worse. Stop looking at me like that. Like what? Like I don't matter. Before I could answer, a hand slid through my arm. Rian. She stood beside me, cold, elegant, completely composed. Then she looked at Yuna. You're raising your voice at my husband. Yuna froze. Rian continued. At a public event. Her voice remained quiet, which meant everyone nearby could hear it perfectly. Whatever you think of Kai, he is my husband. A pause. You will speak to him with respect. Yuna's face changed. Damon suddenly found the carpet fascinating. I stood there completely still, because I'd heard something similar before. Another room, another lifetime. Rian standing beside me when everyone else had turned away. Defending me, again. Only this time, I wasn't dying. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time since coming back, the past and present stopped feeling like separate lives. Maybe this wasn't only about fixing what went wrong. Maybe it was about finally understanding what I'd missed. Yuna walked away. Rian released my arm. I immediately looked across the ballroom. The woman in emerald was gone. Third table, I said. Rian followed my gaze. What? She saw Damon. And she looked terrified. Rian went still. Not emotional. Focused. You noticed that too. I turned to her. You did. Yes. That was enough. The next morning, we started asking questions. Quietly. No accusations. No warnings. 3 phone calls later, we found the first thread. 2 years earlier, the woman in emerald had invested money in a private fund introduced by a charming younger man. The fund disappeared. So did he. The name he used wasn't Damon, but it was close. Close enough. I stared at the information on my screen. My pulse slowed. There you are. In my first life, I had found this trail too late. This time, Damon had barely begun. Behind me, Rian said, Kai. I turned. She was holding another document. Her expression had changed. What? This woman wasn't the first. Silence. I looked at the page. Another city. Another woman. Another fund. Another vanished man. Damon wasn't having an affair. He wasn't chasing love. He was running a pattern. And Yuna was simply the newest target. I leaned back slowly. In my first life, Damon had destroyed me because I didn't understand who he was until the end. This time, I had something better than revenge. I had time. And now, I had Rian. For the first time, Damon wasn't one step ahead. He was already inside our investigation. Damon had used at least 3 names. That was what we knew by Friday. By Sunday, it was 5. Different cities, different investment funds, different women, same pattern. The first was a widow. The second had just finalized a divorce. The woman in the emerald dress had inherited money after her father died. Every time, Damon appeared when someone was wealthy enough to be useful and vulnerable enough to trust the wrong person. He never asked for money immediately. That would have been amateur. He listened, remembered birthdays, sent flowers, made women feel like the rest of the world had overlooked them and he alone had noticed. Then came the investment. Exclusive, private, safe. By the time the money disappeared, the relationship disappeared with it. Rian placed another file on the study table. 680,000. I looked up. Which one? Second victim. That's higher than I remembered. The words escaped before I could stop them. Silence. Rian's eyes lifted. Remembered. My pulse jumped. I looked at the document. Expected. You said remembered. Long week. She watched me. Rian had an inconvenient relationship with details. She noticed them. I changed the subject. What about the company? Dissolved 18 months ago. Director. Fake. Address. Mailbox. Bank. That's more interesting. She turned her laptop toward me. The money moved through 3 accounts before leaving the country. I studied the transactions. And suddenly, I knew the 4th account. Not because it was on the screen, because I'd seen it before. In my first life, a document flashed through my memory. A board meeting. My name attached to stolen funds. Damon had routed money through one of our subsidiaries before framing me. My hand tightened. Rien noticed. What is it? I couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. Check whether any of these accounts ever interacted with companies connected to my family. Humor me. She didn't argue. 20 minutes later, she stopped typing. There it was. A tiny transfer. Almost invisible. A company I recognized. One Damon would eventually use much more aggressively. Rien stared at me. How did you know? I forced myself to breathe normally. Because men like Damon test doors before they break through them. Technically true. Just not the whole truth. She studied me for a long moment, then returned to the screen. She let me keep the lie. For now, we worked together every night that week. 2 laptops, 2 lamps, a growing stack of files, and coffee, black, 1 sugar, no spoon, for both of us now. I noticed that on the 4th night, you've started drinking yours like mine. Rien didn't look up. You started making mine like yours. I was making yours correctly. So was I. I smiled. Marriage was apparently mostly arguments about who had copied whose coffee. There were worse lives. I'd lived one. By midnight, we had enough evidence to understand Damon. Not enough to arrest him. Enough to know what he wanted. Yuna. Or rather, what stood behind Yuna. Her surname. Her access. Her inheritance. Her family. I leaned back. She isn't his girlfriend. Rien closed a folder. No. She's an investment. Yes. That word bothered me more than I expected. Not because I still loved Yuna. I didn't. But I'd once spent years believing Damon had stolen my wife because she loved him more. The truth was somehow uglier. He hadn't stolen her. He had selected her. And Yuna had mistaken being targeted for being adored. Are you going to tell her? Rien asked. No. That surprised her. You don't want to warn her. I did. When I went still. Wrong life. I corrected myself. I've tried warning people like Yuna before. That's not what you said. I looked at her. She looked back. There was no accusation in her face. Only attention. Dangerous. Patient attention. She won't believe us. I said. That part was true. If I show her these files now, she'll say we manufactured them because we're jealous. Rien considered it. She might. She will. You sound certain again. I know her. That answer was beginning to wear thin. But she let it go. Instead, she asked, so what do you suggest? We wait. For what? For Damon to discover that Yuna isn't worth what he thought she was. Rian's expression sharpened. The transfer, the restricted account, the loss of status, the Western branch. Every decision Yuna blamed on revenge had changed her value to a man like Damon. He'll leave, Rien said, eventually, and then, he'll look for someone richer, and expose himself. I smiled. There you are. Rien stared at me. You've thought about this a lot. More than she could imagine. In another life, I might have confronted him. She went still. I realized what I'd said. Again. In another life. Figure of speech. You use very strange figures of speech. I work in communications. It's a professional defect. That almost made her smile. Almost. Yuna came to the house the next afternoon. Uninvited. Naturally. I found her in the entryway arguing with a member of staff. When she saw me, she lifted her chin. Tell them I can come inside. You can come inside. The employee stepped aside. Yuna looked satisfied. I knew you wouldn't treat me like a stranger. I just didn't want you shouting at the staff. That satisfaction vanished. She followed me into the sitting room. I know what you're doing. I sat down. That puts you ahead of me. You and Rien are trying to destroy Damon. There it was. How? People are asking questions about him. People ask questions. About old investments. I said nothing. She leaned closer. He told me you would do this. Of course he did. Damon had realized someone was pulling at his history, so he had prepared Yuna to distrust the truth before it arrived. Smart. I'd forgotten how good he was at that. In my first life, I hadn't recognized the strategy until it had been used against me. This time, I almost admired it. Yuna, what? Asked Damon one question. Her expression hardened. I'm not participating in your games. Then don't. I stood. But if you ever become curious, ask him about the Damien Fund. She frowned. The what? Damien. His name is Damon. Exactly. For the first time, I saw genuine uncertainty. Tiny. But there. What are you implying? Nothing. I walked toward the door. Just watch his face when you say the name. She hated that. Facts can be argued with. Curiosity is harder to kill. You're jealous. She called after me. I stopped. In my previous life, those words would have wounded me. Now they were almost comforting. Some things hadn't changed. I looked back. Of what? She had no answer. Neither did I. That night, Rianne was waiting on the balcony outside the study. The city glowed below us. She stood with both hands resting on the railing. You gave Yuna the Damien name. I stopped beside her. Yes, that wasn't part of the plan. No, because I wanted to see what Damon does when he knows someone remembers it. There, that word again. Rian turned toward me. Remembers. Damn. I looked at the skyline. She didn't push. That was somehow worse. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "Can I ask you something? Anything." Why me? I looked at her. At the wedding. Her eyes stayed on the city. You didn't hesitate. Neither did you. I almost said it. Instead, you gave me a choice. That isn't enough reason to marry someone. It was a good start. Kai. There was no escaping that tone. So I gave her a truth. Just not all of it. I wanted you before the wedding. She finally looked at me. How long? 5 years. Silence. Real silence. Then something astonishing happened. Rian laughed. One quiet breath. You really thought you were subtle. My heart stopped. What? I saw you. The world seemed to tilt. At dinners. She looked away again. Board events. Charity galas. Family gatherings. A tiny smile touched her mouth. You'd look at me until I turned toward you. Then suddenly the ceiling became fascinating. I couldn't speak. I'd heard this before. Not here. Not under a peaceful night sky. On the floor. While dying. Rianne continued. I liked it. My chest tightened. I liked knowing you noticed me. Her voice softened. Do you know how rare it is for someone in my world to want something from me and not immediately reach for it? I knew what came next. I had carried these words through death. I wanted to reach back. She said. There it was. Exactly. My throat closed. But you were Yuna's. Her expression became colder. Not toward me, but toward herself. You were promised to my niece. So you stayed away. I had to. You went cold. It was easier. I stared at her. For years I'd believed her distance meant rejection. Now I was standing inside the second version of my life, hearing the same confession twice. Only this time, I wasn't bleeding. I wasn't dying. And I could answer. Rianne finally turned fully toward me. For 5 years. Kai. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I wanted a man I had decided I wasn't allowed to have. My eyes burned. She noticed. Of course she did. Why are you looking at me like that? Because I've heard you say this while trying to keep me alive. Because I died knowing I'd wasted my chance. Because I begged the universe for another life and somehow woke up on our wedding day. Instead, I said, because I've been waiting a lifetime to hear that. Rianne frowned slightly. A lifetime. I stepped closer. Feels like one. For once. She didn't analyze the answer. Her hand rose. Her fingertips touched my jaw. Careful. Almost uncertain. I'd never seen Rianne uncertain. Then I covered her hand with mine. She didn't pull away. I don't know what this marriage is becoming. She whispered. I do. Her eyes searched mine. What? Real. Something broke through her defenses. Not completely. Just enough. She leaned forward. Her forehead rested against mine. No contract. No audience. No family. No performance. Just us. I closed my eyes. In my first life, I'd spent my final seconds wishing I'd known sooner. Now I had time. That might have been the greatest gift of all. Then my phone vibrated. Of course it did. I ignored it. It vibrated again. Rian sighed. You should check. I disagree. Kai, fine. I pulled it out. A message from one of my contacts. I read it once, then again, and smiled. Rian noticed immediately. What? Damon found another investor. So, I handed her the phone. She read the name. Her expression changed. Cash and Vale. Old money. Private capital. A legal department large enough to qualify as a small government. And a reputation for responding very badly to people who tried to steal from him. Rian looked at me. That's ambitious. That's suicidal. Damon had spent years targeting people who were too embarrassed to expose him. Now he was moving toward someone who didn't experience embarrassment, only retaliation. I looked back at the city. In my first life, Damon had destroyed me because I'd chased him too late. This time, I wasn't chasing him at all. I was watching, waiting, and he was walking exactly where I needed him to go. Rian slipped her fingers through mine. I looked down at our joined hands, then at her. Damon could wait until morning. For the first time in 2 lives, I had something more important than revenge. The man who destroyed my first life was walking toward his own ruin, and the woman I'd lost in that life was standing beside me to watch it happen. Damon stopped answering Yuna's calls on a Monday. By Tuesday, he was arrested. There was something almost poetic about the efficiency. I learned about the first part from Yuna, the second from the news. She arrived at our house at 8:17 Monday morning, looking nothing like the woman who had climbed through a bathroom window to escape our wedding. No perfect makeup, no expensive confidence, no Damon. She stood in the foyer clutching her phone. I need to talk to you. I looked at the clock. Before coffee. Kai, serious. Then, I stepped aside. She entered. Rian was already at work. Probably fortunate for Yuna. Definitely fortunate for my morning. What happened? Yuna stared at me. About Damon. I waited. Her fingers tightened around the phone. He hasn't answered me in 3 days. There it was. In my first life, Damon disappeared after the money. This time, he was leaving before it. Because Yuna had stopped being valuable. Her discretionary accounts were restricted. Her position had been reduced. Her access to family capital was nearly gone. And Damon had discovered a better opportunity. Cash and Vale. You warned me, Yuna said. I gave you a name. Damien. I nodded. Her face changed. I asked him about it. And he said he'd never heard of it. I waited. He was lying. How do you know? Because he looked afraid. Good. For once, she'd looked at the right thing. He got angry. She continued. He asked who had been talking to me. Then he said you were trying to destroy us. Predictable. I defended him. Also predictable. Yuna looked down. I told him I trusted him. That hurt her to say. Not because Damon deserved trust. Because she was beginning to realize what that trust had cost. Then yesterday I went to his apartment. I already knew where this was going. He was gone. She swallowed. Clothes, laptop, documents, everything. Silence. I called him 43 times. I almost asked why she'd stopped at 43. Not the moment. Kai. Her voice cracked. Who is he? That was the first intelligent question she'd asked about Damon. I walked into the study. She followed. I took out a folder. Not the full file. Enough. 5 names. 4 investment companies. 6 known victims. Money transferred through multiple countries. Photographs. Corporate records. Statements. Yuna read the first page. Then the second. By the third, she had sat down. No. I said nothing. No, this could be anybody. I placed a photograph on the desk. Damon. 3 years younger. Different hair. Different name. Same face. Yuna stared. He told me he'd never been to Zurich. He lied. He said his father died when he was 19. Different story for different people, he said. She stopped. That was the problem with discovering someone was a liar. Every memory became evidence. Every romantic moment turned into a crime scene. He loved me. I looked at her. She needed me to agree. Couldn't. He chose you. Her eyes lifted. That's not the same thing. No. I could have been cruel. A previous version of me might have wanted to be. Instead, I told her the truth. Because of your family. Her face emptied. Your surname. Your access. Your inheritance. No, when you lost those things, what happened? She looked away. He became distant. There it was. Not revenge. Arithmetic. Damon had simply recalculated the investment. The arrest happened the next morning. 9:40. I was sitting across from Rianne when her phone buzzed. She read the message, then looked at me. It's done. I didn't need to ask. Still, I did. Damon, taken into custody 20 minutes ago. She slid the phone across the table. Fraud, false identities, multiple victims, financial crimes across several jurisdictions. Cashin's people had pulled one thread. Everything else followed. Damon had made the mistake men like him always make. He believed success meant he was smarter than everyone. Eventually that belief put his hand in the wrong pocket. This time, Cashin's. I read the report twice. In my first life, Damon had vanished. By the time Rian found enough evidence, he'd already destroyed my reputation and moved money beyond reach. Now, he was in handcuffs. I expected satisfaction, maybe triumph. Instead, I felt something quieter. Relief. One ghost gone. Rian watched me. You don't look happy. I am. No. She knew me too well already. I put the phone down. I thought this would feel bigger. Revenge. I looked at her. Something like that. And I considered it. Mostly I'm hungry. Rian stared at me, then laughed. Actually laughed. Not the tiny breath she'd given me on the balcony. A real one. I froze. She noticed. What? Nothing. You're staring. I've never heard that before. Heard what? You laugh. Her expression immediately reset. I laugh. Apparently. Kai, do it again. No. Shame. She stood. I caught her wrist gently. She stopped. Rian. What? Thank you. For what? Everything. For believing me when nobody else did. For finding the truth in another life. For holding my hand when I died. For walking into my wedding in this one. I couldn't say any of it. So I settled for standing beside me. Her eyes softened. You're my husband. This time. She said it like it wasn't a contractual obligation. I kissed her. Not her forehead. Not accidentally. Her. For half a second she froze. Then her hand caught my jacket and pulled me closer. When we separated, her forehead rested against mine. So, I whispered, what? Still planning that divorce? She looked at me. Don't ruin the moment. Promising. Yuna returned 3 days later. By then, Damon's face was everywhere. More victims had come forward. His aliases were public. His funds were being investigated. And his great love story with Yuna had become a punchline. She waited outside my office. Kai. I stopped. She looked exhausted. I need 5 minutes. You have 5. She flinched. Once, I'd have given her 5 years. Now 5 minutes felt generous. We went into an empty conference room. She sat. I remained standing. My grandfather froze the rest of my accounts. I said nothing. My mother can't change his mind. Still nothing. They're keeping me at the Western branch. That sounds like employment. Her eyes flashed. You know what I mean? I do. She looked down. I lost everything. That sentence irritated me. No. She looked up. You still have a job. Silence. You still have your health. Silence. You still have a family willing to let you earn your way back. I pulled out the chair opposite her. You lost privilege. She stared at me. There's a difference. Her eyes filled. I made a mistake. Yes. I was stupid. Yes. I hurt you. I didn't answer immediately. Finally. Yes. She wiped at her face. I thought Damon chose me because he loved me. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then she asked the question I'd known was coming. Did you ever really love me? The room changed. For a second. I wasn't 24. I was older. Tired. Standing in another conference room while my wife allowed strangers to accuse me of crimes she'd helped Damon commit. I remembered looking at her, waiting for her to defend me. She never did. Yes, I said. Yuna started crying harder. I continued. I loved you enough to ignore things I shouldn't have ignored. Kai, I defended you when other people warned me. She frowned, confused. Those things hadn't happened in this life. Not yet. I corrected myself. I would have defended you. She looked at me strangely. I continued before she could ask. But loving someone doesn't mean they own the rest of your life. She reached across the table. Her hand moved toward mine. I pulled mine back. That hurt her more than anything else. If I hadn't run, I knew the question. Would we still be together? In my first life, yes. Until she destroyed me. In this one, I looked through the glass wall. Rianne was walking down the corridor. Dark suit, phone in hand. People moving out of her way without realizing they were doing it. My wife. My second chance. No. Yuna followed my eyes. She saw Rianne. Something finally settled in her expression. Not anger. Understanding. You love her. Yes. No hesitation. No performance. No revenge. Just truth. Yuna looked back at me. For how long? That was almost funny. Longer than you think. Her face crumpled. So the wedding wasn't revenge. The photo. No. The way you looked at her was real. She lowered her head. And finally, Yuna understood. When she'd climbed through that bathroom window, she hadn't left a broken man waiting at the altar. She had opened the door for him to leave. You're not coming back. It wasn't a question. No. She nodded slowly. Then something surprising happened. She didn't scream, didn't blame Rianne, didn't tell me I was pretending. She simply stood. At the door, she stopped. Kai, yes, I'm sorry. I looked at her. In my first life, I had waited years to hear those words. Now that they had arrived, I didn't need them, but perhaps she needed to say them. I know. She left. Rianne entered 30 seconds later. You heard. Enough. She apologized. I heard that part. I walked toward her. Are you jealous? No. Too fast. I smiled. Rianne narrowed her eyes. Careful. I took her hand. She let me. No reason to be. I know. Again. Too fast. I kissed her forehead. Then we walked back toward my office together. Damon was finished. Yuna had finally accepted the truth. The future that killed me no longer existed. I should have felt free. Instead, one final thought had been following me for days. Rianne kept noticing things. The words I used. The names I somehow knew. The events I anticipated before they happened. Sooner or later, she would ask the question I had been avoiding since our wedding. How did I know? I looked at the woman beside me. In my first life, Rianne had learned the truth about Damon too late to save me. In this one, she'd helped me destroy his future before he could touch ours. There was only one secret left between us. And for the first time since I came back from the dead, I wasn't sure whether keeping it was protecting our marriage or lying to the woman I loved. Vera made one final mistake. She assumed losing quietly was beneath her. 3 weeks after Damon's arrest, a rumor appeared online. At first, it was small, anonymous accounts, private forums, whispers dressed up as concern. Then the story sharpened. According to the rumor, Rianne and I had been involved long before the wedding. Yuna had supposedly discovered us. Her escape with Damon had been an act of desperation. Our marriage had been planned. Damon's downfall had been orchestrated. Yuna's transfer had been revenge. By noon, the story had reached business media. By 2, someone used the phrase, corporate coup disguised as romance. I read it twice, then looked across the study. Rianne was reading the same article. Creative, I said. Lazy, harsh. They didn't even check the board dates. That was my wife, accused of destroying her niece's life in an elaborate conspiracy, and offended mainly by poor documentation. My phone rang. Theo. I answered. Please tell me you're seeing this. I am. Are you panicking? No. Should I panic for you? No. John's voice appeared in the background. Defamation. John says defamation. I heard him. Theo lowered his voice. Kai, this is spreading fast. I looked at Rianne. She was already opening a file. Good. Silence. Good. The faster a bad story spreads, the faster everyone commits to a version we can prove wrong. Theo paused. You and Rianne are terrifying. Thank you. I hung up. Rianne slid a folder toward me. Wedding timeline, board minutes, financial reports, corporate restructuring dates, everything. In my first life, I had learned one important lesson too late. When people accuse you loudly, the instinct is to become louder. Usually that's a mistake. You're not issuing a denial. Rianne said. No. Good. You aren't either. No. We looked at each other, then smiled. That was when I realized we'd become extremely annoying together. At 4 that afternoon, I released the timeline. Nothing emotional, no accusations, no attacks, just facts. Yuna left the wedding at 10:17. Rianne entered the bridal suite afterward. The decision to replace the bride was made in front of witnesses. For 100 of them, no secret meetings, no prior agreement, no hidden romantic messages. Then came the corporate records. Yuna's division had been underperforming before the wedding. Her expense problems existed before the marriage. The transfer was supported by 6/4 of numbers. Rianne released one statement, one paragraph, cold, precise. Essentially, the company would not comment on family gossip, but false claims affecting shareholders would be addressed through counsel. Then her lawyers started sending letters. By dinner, the rumor had begun to collapse. By the next morning, it had reversed. People weren't asking whether we'd planned Yuna's downfall. They were asking who had started the lie. Vera stopped answering calls. I considered that progress. Soren summoned the family that evening. Everyone sat around the long dining table. Yuna was there. She looked tired, but different, quieter. Vera sat beside her, rigid. Soren placed both hands on his cane. I warned this family once. Nobody moved. I warned it twice. His eyes settled on Vera. I will not warn it a third time. Vera's face tightened. You think I did this? Soren stared at her. That was answer enough. Yuna looked at her mother. Mom. Vera turned. I was trying to protect you. Yuna's expression changed. A month ago, she would have accepted that. Now, no. Everyone looked at her. She swallowed. You were trying to make what I did someone else's fault. Silence. I didn't expect that. Neither did Vera. Yuna looked at me, then at Rianne. I ran. Her voice shook. Kai didn't make me. Then, to her grandfather, I chose Damon. Another breath. And I was wrong. Vera stared at her daughter as if betrayal had just entered the room wearing her face. Yuna lowered her eyes. I don't need another story where I'm the victim. That might have been the first truly adult thing I'd ever heard her say. Soren nodded once. The matter was closed. For once. Permanently. That night, Rianne and I returned home in silence. Not uncomfortable silence. The good kind. The kind people earn. She poured 2 glasses of water. I watched her from the doorway. Do you still have it? She looked over. Have what? The agreement. She knew immediately. Our marriage contract. Rianne disappeared into the study. When she returned, the document was in her hand. The same pages she'd placed between us on our wedding night. Mutual respect. Public cooperation. No confusion between proximity and feeling. Quiet divorce when the alliance stabilized. She placed it on the table. Well, she said, the situation is stable. My stomach dropped. I knew her. I knew that tone. Still, some stupid part of me panicked. You're serious? Her face revealed nothing. The agreement says we should revisit our arrangement. Rianne, what? I picked up the document. She watched me. Then I tore it in half. Her eyebrows lifted. I tore it again. And again. Kai, no. You could have simply said you disagreed. Less satisfying. She stared at the pieces. Then at me. So professional. I learned from you. No, you didn't. Fair. I stepped closer. The first wedding wasn't ours. Her expression softened slightly. It happened to us. Exactly. I took her hand. I want one that we choose. Rianne went still. I reached into my pocket. Her eyes narrowed. You planned this. I work in crisis management. That isn't an answer. It explains the ring. I opened the box. For the first time since I'd known her, Rianne looked completely unprepared. Good. I wanted one moment she couldn't manage. One wedding started because Yuna ran away. I looked at her. One marriage started because 2 families were afraid of losing a merger. Her fingers tightened around mine. I don't want that to be the reason we stay married. Kai. So I'm asking again. I lowered myself onto one knee. Rianne actually took half a step back. I almost laughed. The woman had faced hostile boards without blinking. Apparently this was worse. Rianne. Her eyes were already shining. Will you marry me? She stared at me. Then, you're an idiot. Is that a yes? You're already my husband. Legal technicality. Kai. Yes. She reached down. grabbed my collar, and pulled me up, then kissed me, hard. When she finally let me breathe, yes, I smiled, yes, yes, just checking. Ask again and I'll change my answer. I believed her. The second wedding had 42 guests, not 400, no merger announcements, no cameras except the ones held by friends, no panic in hallways, no missing bride. Theo cried and denied it. John said, better, which from him was practically a speech. Soren attended. Una did too. She stayed near the back. When our eyes met, she gave me a small nod. Nothing more. That was enough. Rian walked toward me wearing a simple white dress. Not Una's. Not chosen by a family committee. Hers. I watched her come down the aisle, and for a moment, I remembered dying. Cold floor. Blood. Her hand around mine. 5 years too late. Then I remembered waking up. 10 minutes before a wedding. A bride gone through a window. A second chance arriving in the shape of disaster. The officiant smiled. Rian, do you take Kai? I do. Everyone laughed. I did too. Exactly like the first time. She still didn't let him finish. I squeezed her hand. She leaned closer. What? Nothing. You're looking at me strangely. I've heard you say that before. She frowned. When? I smiled. Feels like another lifetime. There it was again. That phrase. This time. She didn't let it pass. After the ceremony. After the photographs. After everyone finally left us alone. Rian found me on the balcony. You say things like that. I looked at her. Like what? Another lifetime. She folded her arms. You knew things about Damon before you should have. My heartbeat slowed. Kai. No escape. Not from her. Not anymore. I don't know what happened to you the morning of our wedding. Her voice softened. But something happened. I looked at the woman I died loving too late. I could tell her everything. Death. Rebirth. The other marriage. Her confession beside my body. But how do you hand someone memories they never lived? So I chose the truth she actually needed. I got a second chance. She watched me. At what? At not wasting my life. Silence. At choosing the right person. Her expression changed. She knew I was holding something back. Of course she did. But she also knew I wasn't lying about that. Rian stepped closer. Will you tell me someday? I thought about it. Yes, maybe I would. Maybe one night. Years from now. When the story sounded less like grief and more like something impossible we had survived. For now, I touched my forehead to hers. She closed her eyes. In my first life, I thought Una was my future. I thought losing her would ruin me. I was wrong. Some people aren't the destination. They're the wrong road you have to survive long enough to leave. Una climbed out of a bathroom window and thought she was escaping a marriage. What she actually did was save me from repeating one. 400 people watched that first wedding and thought it was the most humiliating day of my life. They were wrong too, because I'd lived that day twice. And the second time, I knew exactly what it was. The luckiest day of my life. I looked at Rian, my wife, not my replacement bride, not my contract partner, not the woman I wanted from a distance. Mine because she chose me, and I chose her, this time, before life could take the chance away. I kissed her. And for the first time across 2 lives, I wasn't waiting for the ending. I was finally living the beginning.